Welcome to MINDSHOCK. This is your host, Bruce McGuire, and you are listening to the Flat Earth Live Q&A 12th edition. What are we going to get to today? The chat is open. Is it just me or is there an echo here? Test. Okay, that's a little better. Welcome, everyone. It's been a little while since the stream. Hope everybody has been well. As always, if you want to help support the podcast, help logic and reason return to a world where it is quickly going extinct, you can donate to our PayPal. Check the link in the description. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell for notifications. Like and share. Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, and Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case topic, logical analysis, co-podcast requests. You could also be a guest on the podcast, depending on your tier. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. Unless, of course, you are with us here live, then drop them in the live chat. So we got Zach W in here, Aaron, Justin Johnson, Saber Crosby, interesting name there, Monty, and Aaron. What has been new in the Flatverse? Is it just me, or is there less mainstream flat earth, or should I say anti-flat earth content out there nowadays? I mean, Mark Sargent used to be on all these radio shows, TV shows, news segments. I mean, what's going on? Is he still doing stuff like that, or is there just the interest isn't there on the side of the mainstream? Are they switching their strategy? Anyone alive in the chat out there? We got some people in here, nobody's commenting, or is the chat frozen? Aaron says, if there are more lands outside the Antarctic area, how far does the dome go? Do we have any reports? 1958 encyclopedias seem to nail the height at certain points, but is that reliable? Yeah, that's a good question. Is there more than one dome? That's actually a great question. That's a fantastic question. Let's see what kind of maps we can come up with here. That's a really, I mean, that one got me thinking. I'm not sure anybody asked that before. Relative to the dome. Alright, hold on. Let me play this video. I think it's gonna go over the moon reflection. So, yeah. How big would the dome have to be Yeah, there's definitely an issue with proportion, because if this blue circle is the dome, that doesn't make any sense because it's the lands outside the dome. Huh. Yeah, that's curious. Yeah, let me look at another map here. Again, I do not claim anything is true or untrue. So actually, here is, what is this? New York Journal newspaper, wall of ice. So the wall of ice is not the dome. So the dome would be going far beyond that, theoretically. What if the dome isn't necessarily physical? Could the dome be ever expanding or changing, or are there many worlds? See, in this Terra Infinita map, it states 178 worlds under the Great Dome. But see, the dome would have to be so ginormous for this to work. So I don't know if this makes sense. Yeah, that's tough. Here's another one. It's an interesting one. What's the source of this one? This is a really interesting one because look how uneven Antarctica would be. If Antarctica is this ice wall and then you have other stuff. I mean, look at the stuff here. So you have basic Antarctica here, but it's thin. Yeah, look how thin it is on this side. But then you have all this land here, and then also this. Curious. Let's see if there's another map here. Here's allegedly the first televised picture from space on April Fool's. It's an interesting day. That's an interesting photo too. See, if there is a dome, would that cause this kind of curved look? Because if the dome is black, see, this one nobody's talking about. I mean, look how it could fit theoretically onto this map. If the dome encircles the Earth and you can't see through the dome, it would appear black. Would that give a curvature effect? I don't know if anybody's ever talked about that before. Has anybody discussed what it would look like if there is a dome? I'm not claiming there is, but if there is and it blocks light, would it not make it look like a circle on everything within the dome, regardless of the shape of the Earth? Justin says, I personally think our firmament is an electromagnetic field of a toroid. What's beyond the field? Or is all of land only within that field? Les Xylophone says, Sup Shockers, not Flat Earth related, but everything good with YouTube, Bruce. Not really. They've basically, yeah, even if you search a MINDSHOCK video, it's not going to come up. So they've basically, I don't know what they're doing with the algo, but yeah, they've basically deprioritized. I mean, they've been doing that for a long time, but something weird's been going on their latest update. Basically, nobody can find any of the videos. The older videos don't get any views anymore, whereas even a few months ago, they would still get a lot of views. Not a lot, but there'd still be continual slow views on all videos. So yeah, a lot of weird stuff on whatever their latest update was. It seems like every update, everything gets worse with YouTube. The best incarnation of YouTube was probably over a decade ago, where you would simply, it would just be an organic search. You search something, it comes up. It's not that difficult. And then everything got changed up. Aaron says, that image is not real. It shows too much. Can't get that high. Are you insinuating an April 1st image is not true? How dare you? Les Xylophone says, they hide your content and I'm subbed. Yeah, it's a problem. Monty says, algorithms, another word for indoctrination. Well, when they're manipulated so severely. But no, does anybody have an answer for the dome in Aaron's question? The dome in relation to other land? Because that is a really curious one for sure. I really don't know what to think about that. So here's this map from a Japanese temple, allegedly. And so, what are these circles here in the middle? So is this outer circle? Is that just the ice wall? But then how far does the dome go? It's just, yeah. It's curious. It's definitely curious. Here's another interesting one. What is this? Is this... Actually, yeah, I went over some of these before. They're quite interesting. Let me see here. So there's this one. Walls of Asgard. Wastelands. Yeah, it looks like some kind of fictional map, but, or I don't know if this is based. So we got Atlantis here. Is this somewhat based on Norse mythology, perhaps? And then there's also this one, which is a really interesting one. And I actually mentioned this in terms of Atlantis. Because Plato described Atlantis in terms of concentric circles. So if Atlantis wasn't one specific place, but just a word to describe the entire realm per se. So these concentric rings, are we on the inner concentric ring? Like this particular map shows. So you could see our familiar continents here. I wish this was more high res. I mean, you got a forbidden channel here. Is that Lemuria? Some of these other outer lands, Mu. Like, all based supposedly in mythology. But again, the ancients were just describing their history. Our so-called modern scholars labeled it mythology. But, yeah, it's quite interesting. Flat Bob says, I think that's all garb. Flat Bob says, I'm not convinced that there is a dome. Well, you know what else nobody's talking about? What if the dome is some kind of energy field that can be turned on and off? Like, if you're overseeing a realm and you want to restrict access, I mean, what would be the easiest way to do that? Some kind of energy dome? I don't know. Lord Zed says, to be clear, the rule was 30 pierces in 40 days. So although I fell behind, I can watch 6 pieces in one day and still make it. Yeah, I'm not making that Pierce Brosnan challenge that Lord Zed laid down. Yeah, I was pretty bad. I think I only watched one. I kind of organized some of them, and I was ready to watch more Pierce Brosnan movies, but didn't get to it. Things have been busy. Dr. Bass Ackwards says the fake moon landing and the fake ISS are likely mankind's most embarrassing achievements. Monty says, as far as the dome, I think it exists simply because we have pressure here. Lord Zed says, what a coincidence. I was just thinking this morning, it's funny, they say space goes on forever. New Jerusalem. Aaron says, made a comment on New Jerusalem. Let me see. I don't see the comments. I do not see any comment about New Jerusalem. Oh, there it is. The Christian Bible says the New Jerusalem is something like 300 miles on a side, including height, with Jesus at the pinnacle, possibly pyramid. Maybe it will be the port for coming and going to other worlds. New Jerusalem. Yeah, that's another rabbit hole on where exactly it was. Some people actually believe it was in Utah, the land of Judah, in the United States. Flat Bob says, I think it's closer to 12 to 1,500 miles. Lord Zed says, it's just funny how they are like, there's no end, just don't worry about it. We checked it out, definitely goes on forever. Well, don't they also say the universe is constantly expanding and expanding and contracting, but it's also infinite? I don't know. Aaron says, New Jerusalem is yet to come. How does that tie in with Satan's little season, though? And are we also living past the return of Jesus and the events described in the Bible? And if everything is just kind of cyclical, then it just happens over and over again. Flat Bob says, you should look into Leaving Babylon on YouTube. She goes into the land of Jesus between U.S. and Russia. Leaving Babylon here, yeah. Let me check this channel out. I'm not did I look at this channel before? I may have if somebody else brought it up before. Yeah, let me put this video up. We could talk about it a little bit. Chin Chin says, yeah, Leaving Babylon has some great stuff, comparing the old maps of the Straits to the modern GPS maps. Monty says, it's expanding, but matter and energy are constant. Aaron says, my lunch break thinks we are in the period called the Little Season in Revelation when Satan is released from his chains. It's pretty evil. Dr. Bass Ackward says, funny how all the advancement in tech hasn't helped us achieve anything in space. Flat Bob says, yeah, is it portion or potion of old maps have the land of Jesus that nobody talks about? Okay, this, I haven't heard of this. This sounds quite mind-shocking. I want to get into this. Little bit of lag here, but I want to get this video up. Justin Johnson says, I also subscribe to Satan's Little Season. Aaron says, if MLB is right, then we probably are not far from the new earth with New Jerusalem. What does not far mean in the scope of biblical text, though? Does that mean like years, decades, centuries, millennia, relative to other? Like, how many millennia have come and gone on this realm? It's a wild question, because obviously history's been manipulated, but what? How far back does it actually go? Millions? Billions? And are a lot of the events mostly talking about this specific circle of our realm and not other circles? Like, for example, if we're looking here, like the if we're looking at the moon map, for example, if it's true that this, however you want to call it, the circle of the sun moves over different lands. So these frozen lands will become unfrozen And where our circle, our continents are on our inside circle will become frozen because the sun will have a different path. And it will unfreeze the currently frozen lands. And then it just goes on forever. So have countless millions of years gone on in this place? And as the sun just constantly changes where it rotates? I don't know exactly what this is referring to here. Are these the circles the sun makes? The sun and possibly the moon. But if the moon is new, I mean, I've gone over that before as well, where certain peoples have talked about the time before the moon. So that's another rabbit hole for anybody that hasn't gone down that one. But let's look at revealed the land of Jesus. Straight is the gate. And let's see what's going on here.
I've been searching through evidence related to the North that aligns with the truth of scriptures and prophecy specifically. I have a number of playlists, and I encourage you may want to go and look through them. One of them is called Sides of the North, and I have another video that's called The River. So these videos really start to talk about the geographical, geological, historical, evidence that points to the location of what I would call the camp of the saints in the beloved city. And this is all aligning with scripture. So that's the purpose of my studies, and it always has been. I've also started a series called Surrounding the Camp. So I've done 4 videos in that series, and that really series very interesting to me. And I started to focus on the strait that is closest is the sides of the north. Talks about beautiful for situation, the joy of the whole earth is Mount Zion on the sides of the north, the city of the great king. And so seeking the city in this time of growing deception in which we live has been a real call on my heart, and I know it's been the call on the heart of many people that are also engaging in these conversations. And so one of the early, I guess, insights that I had was from Matthew 7:14. And it's where Jesus is speaking, and he says, "But strait is the gate, and narrow is the way which leadeth unto life, and few there be that find it." And so it's interesting to me that the spelling of the word straight was not the same as what you would say is like a straight line. So a straight line would be STRIGHT. But this word was actually being spelled as strait, which is actually more of a maritime reference to a passage of water between 2 bodies of land. And so it was very interesting to me, and I started to focus on the strait that is closest to the north in terms of like a direct line, and that's the Bering Strait, which is up between Alaska and Russia. And so I kind of started to be drawn to that area, even though, yes, there are a lot of straits in the world. That area in particular was interesting to me because it was right on the side of the north. And it even in Google, if you go look at that strait, it's described as a straight, narrow gateway to the north. So very interesting to me that they even describe it as a straight, narrow gate, even in Google Earth. So I'm not intending for this video to be too long. That pointed to Christianity. And so the evidence that Jesus and the saints had spent much time in the Asian region. And when we when we read like the travels of Paul, for example, in Mark, and the apostles that went to preach the gospel to the whole world, they ended up traveling along the coast of Asia. Now, if this is your first time here, I do not believe that the coast of Asia references the Mediterranean. I believe it references the coast of Asia, which is China, and all along the eastern coast there. So yeah, I don't want this to be too long of a video, but we'll see how it goes. And I just want to let you know this is groundbreaking in the study of the little season. And when we're talking about Revelation 20, I'm talking about verses specifically 7 to 9. And what they say is, and when the 1,000 years are expired, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison, and shall go out to deceive the nations which are in the four quarters of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together to battle, the number of whom is as the sands of the sea. And they went up on the breadth of the earth, and compassed the camp of the saints about, and the beloved city. And fire came down from God out of heaven, and devoured them. So we know that there is an adversary who is going to come against the saints and the beloved city. One thing I would say is that when we're talking about the little season, it comes specifically from those verses there. So it talks about Satan being loosed for a little season. And basically, when Jesus came and he fulfilled his, his word to destroy the temple and to, basically bring his kingdom, the good news of the kingdom was that Jesus was doing away with sin and death and the oppression that was, part of deception, which is what Satan was wielding against mankind forever, like since the beginning. And so I think this rebellion ceased for 1,000 years, and Jesus said it, I believe it, and it happened. And I also believe that Jesus is here, and I believe that the saints are also here. So I really want to delve in now. So in Isaiah 9, Jesus is here, and I believe mankind forever. Jesus was doing away with sin and death and the oppression that was, part of deception, which is what Satan was wielding against mankind forever, like since the beginning. And so I think this rebellion ceased for 1,000 years, and Jesus said it, I believe it, and it happened. And I also believe that Jesus is here, and I believe that the saints are also here.
So, for someone more familiar with her work, what does she mean Jesus is here and the saints are here? Like ever-present entities, kind of like Satan? And again, not to go off into asides, but again, we have to keep in mind, supposedly Satan, Lucifer, and the devil are all possibly different entities. Flat Pop says, no, she means they're up in the north. But existing entities, like immortal entities, ever-present entities in this realm. Chin Chin says yes, in the Arctic. So how does this tie in? We're gonna get real deep here. I didn't want this to be a super long podcast, but I do want to get into a few things here. I'm gonna get into them right now because I want to see how all of this potentially ties together. So, yeah, let me bring up the Utah Judea videos, because there's a couple things that are just incredibly interesting here. And I want to see if we can tie all of this together. She's also saying, so the other thing I took away, I mean, this is pretty dense. She's going over quite a few things here. If alright, hold on a second. Why is this so slow? Okay, so let's see here. Okay, we are missing something here. Something, let me see. Okay. 7 minutes. It's 1 minute. Okay, maybe not. There's another video here. There's quite a few channels going over this information. But I do want to see if this can all be rectified and matched together. And another thing is, though, if the events of the Bible are kind of cyclical, this all happened many, many times over. So is it all true? So was there a Jesus and a Holy Land in the middle, in what we call the Middle East? But then there was also a cycle that happened in the United States, in Utah. Was there another cycle that happened in Asia or whatever? I mean, it's tough to rectify all of this, but we will try, because this is MINDSHOCK. All right, so here's a super quick video. We'll set the stage here. I'll go over a couple, and then we'll get back to the straight.
Check this out. The Americas is Grenada, Israel, the Promised Land. All of these are biblical place names in Utah, including Jerusalem. Utah's nickname is the Beehive State. There is a mountain in eastern Nevada named Mount Moriah, and it is over 12,000 feet high. In Utah, not only is there a river Jordan, but it runs out of a freshwater lake into the Great Salt Lake, which is remarkably like the Dead Sea. There is also a Mount Nebo in Utah, approximately 12,000 feet high. So yes, with evidence this strong, the real Judah was in Utah. People try to say that it was the Mormons that gave these places like Utah biblical names to support their position as Jews. However, this explanation fails miserably because there are no 12,000 feet high mountains in modern day Israel. Therefore, the real Judah or Israel had to be in Utah because it fits the description of the kingdom of Judah perfectly. The name Utah is derived from the name of the Ute tribe. It means the people of the mountains in the Ute language. According to other sources, Utah is derived from the Apache name Yuda, which means tall. In the so-called Spanish language, it was said as Utah. Subsequently, the English-speaking people adapted the word Utah. There is no J in Hebrew, therefore Judah is Yuda, especially when you consider the fact that the J and Y have the same meaning and numerical value and are interchangeable as a result. Manasseh, Mount Nebo, Mount Pisgah, Jericho, South Galilee, Ephraim, Daniel, Nephi, Moab, Eden, Goshen, Jordan. Come on, man. Part 2 coming soon.
What's up, YouTube? It's Biblical Truther. I told you guys the other night when I made that video about the millennium being passed in the United States. Most supporting evidence that I've found thus far. But I have mentioned in the past that I thought that the Mississippi River was actually the Nile, and that down towards the Gulf of Mexico, there, could be the original Garden of Eden. And hang on just a second. Let me look something else up right quick. This came out March 4th. Let's see. Ancient City. Coast of New Orleans. Let's see, here it is right here. So this came out on March 4th, and I've been holding a lot of this info back for a long time because I just hadn't had the supporting evidence up until my wife showed me this. Buildings of these megalithic granite over here, but I don't think this is exactly what. That's not the best part. I'm gonna get to that in just a second, but let me see if I can find that other picture right here. So this is what's left of the Alamo, and it looks an awful lot like I think it was let me get back to it. Well, this is a picture of Jerusalem. I think this is Wikipedia. Picture of Jerusalem, and I'm going to get to Jerusalem in just a minute, but as you can see, there's the temple in the middle. But I was looking over these pictures and then comparing them to the Alamo, and I don't know, man. I can see somewhat of a resemblance, but what I'm going to show you here in a few minutes is going to really blow your mind. Because the way this thing is set up and how they've shown us over the years that it's made, with these walls on the outside. There was a picture that I can't seem to find right now. There it is. There's one of them of what it used to look like. But there was another one that showed the outer wall. And I can't seem to find it now. Huh. Been having trouble doing this video. I don't know why. Maybe it's because I uncovered something that wasn't supposed to be uncovered. But there's somewhere right here in the beginning. I can't believe it's not here now. But anyway, that's the little monument for what's left of the Alamo. It really looks familiar. Oh, here it is. These are the outside walls around the Alamo, which I find peculiar, especially when this is what they tell us it looked like back in the day. But that's not what I really wanted to get to. But it is curious that this thing looks a lot like the temple. But this is an ancient map from Texas history of Jerusalem, Texas. And you see how this thing is laid out. It looks a lot like that city of Jerusalem. This is actually another picture of Jerusalem. And you can see how this thing's shaped. It's got the walled city all the way around it, the temple complex right here in the middle. But this Jerusalem, Texas one, you can see there's a temple complex right here. Walls all the way around. The three, why they're after America, why Gog and Magog. And I don't even see vineyards. And a lot of them are in the valleys, right here in this valley where the Red Sea is dried up now. Thought that was pretty interesting as well. Vineyard. Not that one. Nope. Where'd it go? There it is. So if this valley was the Red Sea at one.
So I remember seeing quite a lot about this, about California here, and a lot of these old maps showing California as an island. There's definitely a lot of curiosities here. A lot of curiosities. Let me just scroll through some of this, and then there's one more video, and then we'll get back to the original.
Never lived. That there at least they might keep their statues, which they had not kept in their own land, and they went in by the narrow passages of the Euphrates River. For at that time the Most High performed signs for them and stopped the channels of the river until they had passed over. I don't so much believe anymore. But anyway, it goes on to talk about how there were some European explorers that came to the United States and encountered these indigenous people, and no matter what language they used, they could not speak to them. And there was like 3 guys on the ship that were Jewish, so they started speaking to each other in Hebrew, and the Indians, they knew Hebrew, so they started chatting with them and talking with them, and yeah, so that's how we find out that the American Indians, aside from the Sanskrit Hebrew writings on all the cave walls and such, that's how we found out that they are actually Hebrews, part of the native Euphrates. But what do you guys think? There's your proof right there. Possibly could have been Rome originally because it's a heavily Catholic place. Many cathedrals, the voodoo capital of the U.S. and such. And then this is the Chandelier Islands right here. So that city that they found, or is now reporting on, but trying to debunk because the experts don't agree, is right up in here, right where the Mississippi flows out. Wasn't Egypt located at the mouth of, was it the Nile or the Euphrates? I forget. But that would put it right there. Was the original promised land, and all the biblical stories unfolded right here.
Selected the East as his empire, and with Eusebius, Jerome, and others invented the present Palestine. He invented Palestine, guys. Just like I stated in Migration Series 2, Flavius Dalmatius, the half-brother of Emperor Constantine, commissioned an anonymous author to create Itinerarium Berganilis, the first ever document calling the Levant the Holy Number. Where is Atlantis? Look on this map. This map got North and South America, and it says Atlantis Insula, meaning the island of Atlantis. Let me tell you something. The Americas is so big. It's funny that they call it an island when it's really the largest landmass on Earth, right? But the Americas are so big that if you're coming from anywhere on Earth, if you go east and west and you keep going, you will reach the Americas. From any point on Earth, from the Middle East, from Africa, from Europe, from Australia, if you go east or west continuously, you will eventually end up in America. So to say that they didn't know about this landmass is ridiculous. They knew about it. Everybody has always known about the Americas because, like I said, it's the easiest accessible place on Earth. All you have to do is keep going west and you'll get there. All you have to do is keep going. Number 1, Babylon. That's in the Quebec, New England, Acadia region. Number 2, Medo-Persia, which is right next to that, around the Toronto area. Number 3, Assyria. Started out in the Florida, Georgia, South Carolina area, spread.
This is a curious map. I don't think I've seen this one exactly. Babylon is northeast Canada, and even some of the northeast U.S. I don't know about this. What is left there that would indicate that? Are there weird temples? I mean, I know there's there's some very strange stone work all throughout that area, but I've never seen anything massive, anybody revealing anything massive on the scale of what would be Babylon. Similarly, what is this? Medo-Persia is the Great Lakes region, north of the Great Lakes, Canada. Assyria going through the Midwest into the southeast U.S. I mean, there is the Old World Florida YouTube channel, which shows Florida as Atlantis with some very interesting information there. But, yeah, you have Ethiopia as Brazil and the surrounding countries. I don't know about this particular split here. Let's see what he says about it, but...
all the way northwest to Lebanon. Number 4, Hamath. Hamath was right north of Lebanon. Number 5, Canaan, also known as the land of Israel, spread all the way from the Great Sea to the Euphrates or the Mississippi River. Number 6, Mizraim, west to east from the Colorado to the Mississippi, north to south from the Colorado all the way down to the southern tip of the Andes. And number 7, Ethiopia, aka Kush. It started off on the Gihon River, which is the South Atlantic, and spread throughout South America and spread east into Africa from West Africa all the way up to modern Ethiopia, also known as Aksum or Abyssinia. Now look at this. This is history they didn't tell you in school. All right. In circa 100 BCE, Diodorus Siculus of Rome talked about the Phoenicians of Carthage and learned about America, calling it the land of the gods. Diodorus Siculus describes America circa 100 BCE. Now this is in a book, and the book cost $200. It's about how the Greeks did in fact come to America. And Homer's Odyssey, which is a very, very important piece of Greco-Roman literature, states very specifically that they did in fact come to the Americas. Translated from the Greek, far out off the African coast there is an island remarkable for its size, which as it lies in the ocean to the west has a distance equal to the trip of some days from Libya. And generally speaking, this island has such a mild climate that most of the year produces a lot of fruits from the trees and other seasonal fruits. Therefore, with its excessive wealth, it looks like it's been created from the very beginning as an abode of gods, so to speak, and not humans. This is because the Americas are the best place to live on the earth. Why do you think out of all places, when you go to Asia, you're going to see Asians? When you go to Africa, you're going to see Africans. When you go to Europe, you're going to see Europeans. But if you go to America, you're going to see all races. You're going to see all kindreds, all peoples, all languages. Why is that? Because everybody wants a piece of this. This is the best land to ever exist. It has the best climate, the best foods, and everything that America could possibly offer. They wanted this land. And America is not that far from the east. Did you know Brazil is closer to Africa? Listen to what I'm about to say. Brazil is closer to Africa than it is to Brazil. I'm going to repeat. Brazil is closer to Africa than it is to Brazil. Because Brazil is such a huge country. It's bigger than the span from Brazil to Africa. It's bigger than the South Atlantic. So, America is not even that far from the east. There's been trade. There's been all kinds of things. Do not underestimate the ancestors. They were very intelligent. They'll tell you that, we were cavemen and we learned all this stuff and got smarter and smarter, but that's not true. In history class, they told us history repeats itself, right? If history repeats itself, then that's a contradiction to whatever you're teaching. Opposite to Africa lies a very great country in the vast ocean, of many days sail from Libya westward, which was unknown for a long time because of its remote situation, that it was finally discovered accidentally by some Phoenicians sailing along the west coast of Africa, who were prevented from landing and driven far to the west by violent storms, and that they found a new country rich in fauna and flora, and everything suitable for the wants of man. Now pay attention to how they just describe America, right? The soil here is very fruitful, a great part whereof is mountainous, that's the west, but much likewise champaign, which is the most sweet and pleasant part of all the rest, for it is watered with several navigable rivers. All right, the Americas have so many rivers, right? Colorado, Mississippi, Amazon, etc. Beautified with many gardens of pleasure, planted with diverse sorts of trees and abundant orchards, interlaced with the currents of sweet water. Sweet water, pay attention to that part. That means there's a lot of natural springs from the earth, minerals in the water. You know what I'm saying? Didn't just live in teepees and huts like they tell you. They lived in castles. I've been trying to explain to people that the Americas had the best buildings, bruh. If you think we could build pyramids, why don't you think we could build a castle, bruh? A pyramid takes so much more mathematics, so much more work and labor than a castle. We had castles over here. We had dungeons. We had beautiful cities. We had empires, all that stuff. The seven kings. About Japhia, we talking about the land of the Philistines, right? That's the land of Asher and Zebulun, bro. That is described. They rated the life perfectly, because there's a scripture in Deuteronomy that literally describes the Holy Land. It says, "For Yahuwah thy Allah bringeth thee into a good land, a land of brooks of water, and of fountains and depths that spring out of." Talking about the springs, that the land is full of springs, man. And what do we know about springing water? It has a high mineral content. What do we know about the Native Americans? You can Google this. The Native Americans, which were our people, like to jump in the springs and in the rivers to heal their body, because those minerals will absorb into the skin and it'll go into the bloodstream and they'll get healed of any sickness. Just like in scripture, when the Syrian with the leprosy came to Elisha and said, "Cure me, please." He just said, "Dip yourself 7 times in the Jordan River." He was cured from his leprosy. It's talking about basically a land that had healing waters. Healing waters. You know, the most healing waters are found in Western North America. And the Old Testament, the Tanakh, even says that the Jordan River was a healing river. And it just says that America had healing waters because it says, "Whence the inhabitants not only reap pleasure and delight, but improve their health and strength of body." It's talking about the springs and the waters that are in this land. And it continues to describe the Holy Land, because look what it says right here. "There you may have game enough, and hunting all sorts of wild beasts, of which there is such plenty that in their feasts there is nothing wanting, either as to pomp or to delight. The adjoining sea furnished them plentifully with fish, for the ocean there is naturally abounds with all sorts." So it says the ocean next to the western part, which is the mountainous part, is full of all fish, just like.
So I'm going to push back a little bit on the thermal springs. Here's a map of all the thermal springs in the world. Or not. YouTube's being weird. Hold on. Why is this not working? Alright, so here's a distribution of all thermal springs in the world. So yeah, America, Western US has a ton, but so does the Mediterranean. I mean, look at that. Look at that concentration there. I mean, it's kind of hard to tell where's more, but it's kind of equal. Some of the Mediterranean in Europe and the Western U.S. Also, the western coast of South America is abundant in springs. And Japan, for some reason. Interesting. Interesting. Well, let's continue. I'm going to finish this up real quick, and then we'll go back to the original video.
The Pacific Ocean. Come on, guys. And then on top of that, it says this land you may find all sorts of wild beasts. The Holy Land has 7 clean beasts. We're talking about buffaloes. We're talking about mountain goats. We're talking about the fastest animal on earth, which is the pronghorn, right? We're talking about the wild sheep, right? We're talking about the elk. We're talking about the deer. We're talking about the moose. All these are clean beasts, and they're found in the Holy Land. And you can hunt as much as you want. You can eat as much as you want. The food will overflow out of your mouth because you'll still have more left over in the Holy Land. Not in Africa, not in the Middle East, in America, guys. This is the truth. Now look, watch them describe the climate. The air and the climate of this island is very mild and healthful, so that the trees bear fruit, and other things that are produced there are fresh and beautiful, most part of the year, so that this island, for excellency in all respects, seems rather to be the residence of some of the gods, rather than of man. So Diodorus Achilles is saying that America seems like it should be a place where the gods live, not men. Why is that area so good? Gods should live there. Guess what? Who are the gods of earth? Israel. Period. The Phoenicians, who are Tyre and Zidon, didn't discover America. They came from America as seafaring peoples, and this is a generous fact that people must understand, and I'm gonna present it more in my future videos. Look at this old newspaper, Atlantis found in 1492. I read with much interest the article on the lost continent of Atlantis. This and numerous others about Atlantis only serve to fix more firmly in mind the idea that the continent supposed by the ancients to exist beyond the Pillars of Hercules, which is the area between Spain and Morocco, was found by Columbus in 1492. Columbus, instead of discovering the new route to India, found Atlantis instead. It was always known that the Tanakh came from not only the Tanakh, but even the cuneiform tablets of Babylon and Assyria, the Epic of Gilgamesh and more, came from the 7 kingdoms of Atlantis. And the stuff is very simple, bro. The nation of Israel is one of the 7 kingdoms of Atlantis. And we have to understand this, man. We have to really understand this. The kingdom of science, literary utopianism, and the British education, 1612 to 1870. Now, this is very important to understand. We have to read this book. Got some good knowledge in it. In the middle paragraph, each nation, including the Indians of Atlantis, visited every year. The Western Hemisphere Indians once had a high culture. They are primitive only in consequence of the great wars and subsequent flood that took away their culture, forcing them to make a simplest of adaptations to nature.
Wow, that's a big one. That's a big mind shock right there. So, were the Native Americans... By the way, I have a large Native American library, and I've read a lot of their history and what so-called modern scholars of the educated school system describe as mythology, but it's simply their history in their words, that there was a great flood, a great ending of the world. That's actually very curious to be phrased that way, that before that end, were they the highly advanced Atlanteans themselves who had a great reset per se? Were they the builders of all of this architecture that survived these great wars? So the teepee Indians living one with nature, or natives rather, living one with nature, were those kind of the wise successors per se? Because technology, absolute power corrupts absolutely, and the technology, when reaching a certain point, self-destructs the people that built it. Is that just an inevitable cycle of civilizations? And has the true wisdom in living with nature, which a certain portion of Native Americans adapted to? Now, the coincidence theorists, authority worshipping cultists, bootlickers, they'll probably hallucinate and spam false dichotomies that Native Americans could have only been these TP bow and arrow people, and they could not have been these highly advanced Atlanteans as well. But this is a critical point here. Very curious.
Go to the bottom paragraph. It says, but a real Atlantis existed. Great Atlantis, powerful before Ben Salam became important. The real Atlantis that you call America. They tell you that Atlantis is America. In the book called Antiquities of the Cherokee Indians, we can find many interesting things. This is the oral traditions of the Hebrewistic Indian tribes, right? Certain American Indian tribes had Hebrewistic practices. They practiced Hebrewisms just like certain tribes in Africa practice Hebrewisms. Therefore, if they had no contact with any other people who were holding a Bible in their hand and they were just randomly practicing Hebrew stuff, it would only be a logical assertion that these are indeed the descendants of the children of Israel. So anyway, this is what a certain explorer, or maybe spy, I should say, had to say about the Cherokees, because he heard the oral tradition that they gave. Mr. Boudinot, speaking of the Indians, said, "It is said among their principal or beloved men that they have it handed down from their ancestors that the book which the white people have was once theirs. That while they had it, they prospered exceedingly, but that white people bought it of them and learned many things from it." Let's make some observations real quick. What is that book? That book is called the Scriptures, specifically the Tanakh, the Old Testament, which they call the Bible, or the Hebrew Bible. The Indians said that the white man got that book from the Indians, or the Israelites. Yes, because Alexander the Great came to America, took Jerusalem by force, and seized all the documents found in the temple. Brought back 100 or so documents to the Middle East, or specifically to Macedonia, and then eventually into the Library of Alexandria. People bought copies of the book from the Levant, and then the Idumeans found them and then claimed it as their history and became the first fake Jews. But anyway, yes, the white man did indeed take the scriptures from the Indians, or the American Aboriginals, who are the Israelites, just shortly after the time of Joel. Very shortly after the time of Joel. Now anyway, and it says, while the Indians lost credit, offended the Great Spirit, and suffered exceedingly from the neighboring nations. What does that sound like? Deuteronomy 28. Once we offended Yah by breaking his commandments, we suffered greatly, right? We were led out of our land. Where did we go? Well, look at what the Indians had to say. That the Great Spirit took pity on them and directed them to this country, that on their way they came to a great river which they could not pass, where God dried up the waters and they passed over dry shod. So understand this. First thing first, the Tanakh was originally written by the Indians, which were the Israelites. This is what the Indians said. The second thing is that the Indians, which were specifically the East Coast Indians, these are the East Coast Indians because they're Cherokee, which are East Coast tribe, angered Yah, and for that, they were sent out of the Holy Land. And then you have to understand that the Indians had to cross a great river. What was that great river? That great river was the Mississippi River, and I'm going to explain it further on, which Yah dried up for them to get to their current in North and South Carolina, New York, Pennsylvania, etc. Most of those places which I named, everything except for Texas and Louisiana, is east. Page 41. It says that a king of their nation, where they formerly lived far to the west, that a king of their nation by James Adair. He talks all throughout the book of how the Indians that he talked to were Hebrews, right? Now another dude, Robert Williams, who was another spy among the Indians, this is what he had to say. Robert Williams, the first Englishman in New England, who said to have learned the Indian language in order to convert the natives, believed them to be Jews. Why do all these people believe them to be Jews? Because they did Israelite stuff. And he assures us that their tradition records that their ancestors came from the southwest. So they didn't come from the Middle East. They came from the southwest. All these tribes are saying they came from the west and they crossed a certain river. What river is that? The Mississippi. Come on. So they're telling you that their kingdom was on the west. That these Indians are not saying anything about coming from the east. These Indians are not saying anything about crossing the sea. These Indians are specifically saying they had Webster had to say, bro. Noah Webster, the author of the most famous dictionary used in the English language, the Webster's Dictionary. He said this in 1828. He said education is useless without the Bible. Holy Land back then. People knew that the Holy Land was in America.
So I really want to delve in now. So in Isaiah 9, 6-7, this is one of the most beautiful passages in scripture that was the prophecy of Jesus and what he was going to do. And so it says, "For unto us the child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and peace there shall be no end, upon the throne of David and upon his kingdom, to order it and to establish it with judgment and with justice from henceforth, even forever. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will perform this." Isaiah 9, 6-7. So let's start looking at the evidence that has been brought to my attention, I believe, by the Holy Spirit. I was sitting at my desk, doing a bit of research, but I just put my head down and I said, "Lord Jesus, where are you?" I said, "Please show us where you are." And I say that a lot. I pray that a lot. And it was as if there was this delivery to the front of my mind, and it just came out of the back of my mind in a way. It was some kind of information that had been there already, and I'll walk you through that a little bit. But what I want to show you here is I had always felt very uncomfortable with the international date line, which is on the 1/80th longitude. And why would they break it like this? What is the function of changing time zones right in this area? So as I went through the study, I really decided to call it the International Gate Line because I believe it's being gate kept. I believe there's been a very big cover-up, and I'll show you as we go through this. So I started to wonder why, what is the mechanism? What are the mathematical magic spells that they've cast here? And it's definitely what's happened. I've said before, this is very much a smoking gun. On the international scene when we're talking about politics and international kind of the emergence of, let's say, tensions that they build through the press. You know, it's just a visual thing. We don't know if it's actually happening or not. But they build a visual tension between certain countries. And one of the big ones is United States and Russia. And it always has been. And we can think of things like the Cold War, for example, being a time in our more recent history where many of us will remember things like the Berlin Wall being built or coming down. And some of these events that, in my mind, were kind of gates to the next level of the plan, if you will. So this area here in particular was always a smoking gun for me. I think it represents that this is not a hostile positioned for two countries to hold. Even though, yes, that area is highly militarized, if they really wanted to, succinct small video, I think it's about 3 to 4 minutes long, but it did get me thinking, and I did just kind of take a screenshot of one of the maps that she had put in there. So it's called the Jesus Map, her video, and she's just asking a few questions about what this means on the maps, and we'll go into that in a little bit. So thank you, Jane. I also, in my journeys through the maps, actually picked up a couple more little pieces, but I didn't know where to put them because actually I just put them in the back of my mind and kind of filed them away somewhere in my computer because I didn't really know what to do with them, because in my mind, the center north was the location that Jesus and the saints are. That was in my mind. So these two little pieces of land here just have this reference, land of Gesso. But recently in March, a friend of mine, Yanni, and I were speaking, and he shared with me some of the pictures that he had seen recently, more in the Pacific region. And these ones had to do with Japan, as well as the land of Mu that some people have referenced as well. And those are kind of more in the mid to South Pacific. And they were just kind of, but it got me thinking again about the Pacific. And I had just seen an article on the news that showed people finding like a brick yellow road under the ocean north of Hawaii. And I'll just zoom in on this. So that road is like made of yellow brick, and that's the name of the Marine National Monument where they found it in that area.
Really? The yellow brick road. Well, we have to follow it now. How can we not follow the yellow brick road? I mean, there's also Bimini Road. I mean, there's so many of these underwater roads. Do all roads lead to Rome?
I can't pronounce it, so I'm not going to try, but that, and then I joked that maybe the yellow brick road leads to the Emerald City. And if you take a line and you draw it directly up to the north, it goes directly through what we would call the Bering Strait. So there's no deviance, it's a straight line. So that all got me thinking, the international date line is a mystery, and I have not seen anyone fully answer why on one side of the date line at the Diomede Islands, at the most narrow point, allegedly, you have a 10 a.m. on a Saturday, but a 7 a.m. on a Sunday, which leaves a 3 hours of missing time. So in God's perfect world, there is no missing time. There's no gaps. Things move as they should. It is a perfect clock. So why the missing time here? This seemed manufactured to me. And it seemed that they were manufacturing it for some reason. And I couldn't really figure it out. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. So that's when I started praying, Lord, where are you? What is going on here? Well, what I did was I took the 3-hour missing time, and I thought, how many time zones? So that 3 time zones, how big is that? How much land would that be if you were to measure that? So I took just a snip across 3 time zones and took that same snip and I just created space. Well, isn't it funny that they actually use the word space for their, I would say, Babylonian assault on the heavens and on the Lord, just like Nimrod. So this word space is very interesting, but it also made me realize that they have entered empty space into this region here. Or let's say they've created space by removing something. And so that got me wondering, I wonder what would have gone in that space if they actually did remove something. Well, isn't it interesting, when I measured 3 time zones, it is approximately 1,000 miles. And that would be, in Canada, that would be about 3 states wide. 3 provinces wide. So that would be BC, Alberta, and Saskatchewan. And that is approximately 1,000 miles. Now, that's huge. If anyone's not aware, that's a very big space. So I went back to old maps and I thought to myself, this one has always really intrigued me, because this area, so I started to look at the Pacific region off the Asian coast. And I keep coming back to this map, which has Jesus clearly depicted out here in the water off the coast of Asia. And actually, I think this is Japan down here. So why would they just put Jesus there out in the water? And why would they be referencing Christians on their text underneath? This is definitely Jesus, because the spear that goes into his side is biblical reference to let us know that that is Jesus. And, you know, memorably, the cross is what reminds us of Jesus and his death. So I started to look up here a little bit more, and I noticed, okay, this familiar name called Anyan, and Fret means strait. So this is the Strait of Anyan. And I've seen that previously in a lot of maps. And this one actually says America on it. However, America is not that close to Asia, and yet everything else over here is proportionate. So how could this land here be called America? But, you know, I had thought that before, but I didn't really take it any further.
Is anyone else really fascinated right now that hasn't seen this before? I mean, I don't know exactly what she's getting at, but it seems like she's insinuating that there is a vast land that is being hidden on all the on modern maps. And that's quite curious, is it not?
So I started looking up old maps, and I realized that the mapping system always positions us in the middle here between Europe, Africa, North America, and South America. And we're always looking at this middle bit. And I thought, that's interesting. If you look at the top here, the land of Greenland actually looks really big, and it looks like it's all connected across. So it looks like the land at the top goes all the way across. And I started to follow it across, and I said, hey, it actually comes down here, and terra means land. And I saw this land off the coast of North America. And that actually says Terra de Jesu. And it is right there in the middle of the Pacific. So that piqued my interest, because it looks like it's attached to all this land up here. So I decided to look at it more. And I caught this, which was really interesting. So if the 180 latitude, which is the international date line, comes down here. And we have the familiar names of the Asian Northeast locations on that side. Then this is the strait that comes down next to Asia.
Ocean Tartariov, Tartarikve, or Tartariov. Can't tell there. This is very fascinating, though. So and this kind of all goes back to everything, like what is going on at the North Pole and the originally depicted Mount Meru and all of that, and the four rivers going to the rest of the world, and then all the maps changed. And then what is going on beyond Antarctica? And is the North Star really what you should be following? So should everybody be making the journey to the North Pole? And is everything in the south, like Antarctica and the lands beyond, is that all a distraction? Does anybody really know?
But it actually says the Strait de Yesu, Strait de Yesu. However, this over here says the Strait of Anyan, which is the one we saw next to Alaska, which means Alaska is not next to the 180 degree, the 180 latitude. And there is something in between. There is land in between. So here we have the 180 international date line, and we have the other strait over here, the Strait of Anyan. So what is this in the middle? What is this Greenland? Not Greenland, but what is this land outlined in green? So I went to another Asian map, and I found land right next to Asia. And it's called Terra de Yesu. And when I type that into the Latin to English translation, it says the land of Jesus. Terra de Yesu, which is right off the coast of Asia in these maps. So I thought I need to find more maps, of course. So I went over here and I noticed this one is called the Strait of Anyan, and this land here is actually called Anyan, not America. So the closest thing I could find was Aeonian. There are documents on Anyan, by the way, but they mythologize it. So I'll go to those in a little bit. But initially I found this. And so it was belonging to Aeonia, a region of ancient Boeotia containing the mountains of Helicon and Cathaeron, sacred to the Muses or Aeonian maids. Aeonia may have been a district of ancient Boeotia, a region of Greece. So we know that Greece is not where they say it is either. John Milton referred to Aeonian Mount as in Paradise Lost. So Paradise Lost is I would say an occulting of the truth, but it does kind of reference that there was a lost land. Okay, so Paradise Lost and Aeonian. So I started to look at maps that I've looked at before. And this map here from 1776 shows that what the chartographers did was they created this land that stuck way, way out from North America because they knew that in the old maps there was land very close to North Asia. So they put the land way out into the water, but connected it to the Alaska land. And what happened was people started to reference that land to just being Alaska. And this is 1776, so that should give you an idea of maybe what was going on. Another map from 1776 shows a smattering of islands, and it also shows a very strange land geology in this region here. I do not believe that that represents Alaska, but I think it was moved further away so that they would actually start to think that this was actually Alaska. I think this is the land of Anyan, but they have actually confused things, and I'll show you why. Eventually, we started seeing this map, and this is from 1915. And what they did as well was they actually started to create natural reserves, so bird reserves and military outposts, and they circled all these islands like you can't go there, you can't go there, you can't go there. And it is my view that these are not actually islands. I believe there's land out there, or there was land out there, and I think it's still there. So what really got me started on this was I was looking at Greenland because I was trying to work on my surrounding of the camp videos, and I wanted to see a little bit more of the old depictions of Greenland. Well, what happened was I noticed that, again, it looked like it was all connected here at the top. So the connection of the land made me wonder, well, how far does this go? And sure enough, there is a large component of land right between North America and Asia, and it is called Terra de Yesu. Yezo Yesu. The land of Jesus.
Okay, I mean, she's definitely onto something. She's definitely onto something. There is a lot of irregularity with all of these maps, and she's connecting quite a few dots here. I'm impressed. I am definitely impressed, but it seems like there's more questions than answers after looking all of this as well.
Very close to China. You can even see the wall of China going there. And you can see Tartary and Cathay. So the Terra de Yesu was very, very close to Asia. And I'll show you here again. Terra de Yesu is the land of Jesus. And this map here, 1702, really, really demonstrates what I'm talking about. You have a strait on this side and a strait on this side. This side here is North America, and it used to, even on the Mercator map, all the way up to the top, it's called California. And this land in the middle is called Terra de Yeso. And this here is called the Mer de Yeso, the Sea of Jesus. So we have one strait on that side, and we have one strait on that side. Strait is the gate, and they have deleted what was in the middle by removing the time zones. So this depiction shows that there is no known existence of anything in that region. If you are a person on the east coast of Asia and you look across and you see land, you will think you're seeing Alaska. If you are a person in Alaska looking across and you see land, you will think you're seeing Russia.
Okay, the next main question here is what's going on with flights or boats with, of course, maps and radar and everything? Are they not traveling the distance they think they are traveling? That would be my next question.
Have deleted this from anyone's knowledge below a certain I guess, security pass. So one of the other things that they did is I noticed on the old maps, everything counts upward all the way around. So you'd have 180, 185, and they go up by 5s. However, in the new version of the spherical Earth, they actually remove that and they stop everything at 180, and then they count backwards to the opposite meridian, which is in Greenwich. So therefore, they've completely canceled out any problem of people wondering what happened to these longitudes. I found this map as well. So this is called the Sea of Kamchatka. And yes, again, I noticed down here, we have the Terra de Yeso. And they never finished, drawing where the land is, but it's showing there. So Terra de Yeso, land of Jesus. And when I went up here to see what was on here, I noticed this. It says Camp de Jesu with a G. And when I type that in to the Latin translator, it says Camp of Jesus. Is that Camp of Jesus? Another map here shows that the international date line
So in Latin, comp means together or with, which is interesting.
goes down the middle here, and they're calling this now the Strait of Anian. On the other map, it was over here. So they're confusing, where is the Strait of Anian? Well, we see a strait there, and we see a strait here, but we still have this problematic land in between. And something that I just found interesting was the red and white line that they've used to start canceling the time, start removing and deleting the time, because we know that barbers cut off excess, and we know that the North Pole has been attributed to Tricky Nick, right? Satan claws. And you can also have candy canes with the same colors on them. It's a trick they play, and they get everyone to participate because that's how we consent to that tricky story being played on us. So this one is from 1683. This map here from 1666 actually shows a even better, I would say, depiction of the north. So the Greenland being attached all the way across to this area here, which also says Terra de Yesu. And it actually shows 3, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines across. So the Strait of Anian is showing there, and then the other strait is showing on the other side, and that looks like a large peninsula down there. So it would make sense why they cannot traverse the north. If this is land all the way at the top, this would make sense why they cannot traverse the north. So here is another depiction again, and this one is kind of done from overview of all the lands. And it's very clear here in orange that Greenland is connected all the way across the north to and it says land of Arcti. And down here, Terra de Yeso, the Mer de Yeso, that's the Sea of Jesus. And I think, this going through here is a kind of Arctic passageway. Septentrional. And yeah, so it's all connected at the north. And this is very interesting when we start talking about Gog and Magog, because they are going to come up out of the four quarters of the earth, and they are going to march across the plateau, or the great plain of the earth, the broad plain, and they are going to surround the camp of the saints and the beloved city. So why does anyone think that they would have hidden this land? And why, if it's connected to Greenland, are the military so interested in Greenland, protecting, as they say, Greenland, owning Greenland? Why in the World War II were the Axis so interested in the Thule Society, or the Thule Society? There is an actual German government center in Greenland. And there's evidence to say that I think the Gog and Magog forces are actually gathering on the other side of the north, and they are going to, culminate their attack. They're going to gather their attack from this area here, and they will come towards the camp of the saints in the beloved city. And what's interesting as well is that in Psalms, it talks about and this is the name of my playlist actually, the sides of the north. So the sides of the north is where the city of the great king is. Beautiful for situation, the joy of the whole earth is Mount Zion on the sides of the north, the city of the great king. So a lady that I talked to sent me this very, very interesting piece of connection information, and I just want to read it to you. So when we're talking about Anyan and Kivira as being noted on the maps in that kind of most western location of North America, it says here, the Strait of Anyan is 15 leagues and can easily be freed in a tide of 6 hours, and those tides are very rapid. He commented in 1588 letter to Philip II of Spain. Several decades later, Ben Israel commented that among the miracles the blessed be he did with the 10 tribes, he also created this strait known as the Strait of Anyan, so they can remain separated and hidden from the nations. And I will ask my friend if she can give me the link to that. I have a number of documents that talk about the Strait of Anyan, but I would like to find that actual document.
Other than all of this being obviously very, very mind-shocking, I wonder how much of this puzzle piece, so if this puzzle piece was figured out, how much that could connect to countless other puzzle pieces, Tartaria, hidden history, etc. Because this is definitely a big one. This is definitely a big one. This is quite possibly the absolute most mind-shocking concept that I've seen recently. I mean, this is literally earth-shattering.
Document. Something else I noticed is the 60th parallel is very important because it demarks the Arctic Circle, shall we say. And what's really interesting is that in darts, and I think this goes for a lot of sports, the highest score is actually right there. It's 60. and it's at the double treble, I think 20 treble or something like that. So that position right there in relation to, let's say, the center is, I would just say it's interesting that that is the highest mark if you get your dart there. So something else I wanted to talk about was I've been covering the coastal cataclysms in my series as well. So I have a series called Coastal Cataclysms. And one thing I suspect actually did happen at the end of the millennial reign was there was cataclysm. And I think that was like related to the loosing of Satan, but also a covering, maybe a veil of some kind going over the camp of the saints, over the beloved city. And what I would say is that, let's look at this map a little bit. So this map here is the post-war New World map, and this is from 1942, I think. And all the blue is kind of the regions that are protected or militarily assigned to the United States. And you'll see here that Greenland and Canada are there in blue. Okay, so this is called, all across it, the United States of America. And they talk about USA peace and security outposts, so all of these islands sort of around the Atlantic Ocean. And then even much more as you go into the Pacific Ocean, there's a lot of, let's say protectorate going on. And then all the way down to South America. And if we look over here, the extension of the United States military peace and security goes all the way over to Japan and even the Philippines and even a little island over here right by China. And something that I noticed as well was that Japan was completely quarantined after the war. And if you look at the history of Japan and the, I would say, Christian influence that was taking place there, my friend Jana revealed to me that she found out that the Japanese had expelled the Jesuits from Japan. And they even had a no-entry law or policy. You couldn't go into Japan. So this quarantine indicates to me that something very, very important happened there or was known there. Not to mention that we know that as a part of the World War II events, we know that there was a severe attack on Japan specifically. And of course, they had to give us a narrative that made Japan look like they deserved it, right? So, so we can see around all through the Bering Sea area, there's this region that is militarily assigned to the United States. Now, that's not the only thing I went to see here, because when I started reading the bottom of here, I'm not going to read it all. I can link to this map, but I wanted to just read something from this number 2 section here underneath where it says our policy shall be this. And this is an absolutely fascinating read. They even call it a new world moral order for permanent peace and freedom. Well, we know that the freedom cult, liberty cult, believes that Lucifer gave them true liberty, and that is to do what thou wilt. So when you read it through the lens of the liberty cult, this is what they were kind of writing their policies under the basis of. Now, the old world, I'm reading number 2 here. The old world order of colonial oppression, exploitation of dominions, rival imperialisms, and mercenary balance of power diplomacy, of majesties, dictators, privileged minorities, plutocratic monopolists, and similar social parasites. The corrupted order, responsible for the present world cataclysm, that's the key word I'm going to look for here, endangered our national safety and peaceful progress, and shall never rise again. And they refer to cataclysm in other parts of this as well. So it is my belief that at the end of the millennial reign, there was a cataclysm. And I think it was, as all things are, I think God allowed something to happen that would protect, the people of God that were living in the holy city and in the land and the camp of the saints. So I think that's why the cataclysm happened. And I've covered this.
So, what does everybody think of how this relates to Utah, Judah? So, was there some kind of migration there into this lost land in the north? Yeah, I'm gonna have to deep dive the Leaving Babylon channel myself, as this is absolutely fascinating stuff. I think I'm gonna have to check out the Surrounding the Camp videos next, but yeah, I'm just curious. So what does she have, the people that actually have watched a ton of her videos, does she ever actually connect Middle East to Utah, to this camp or land in the north, that is this missing land in the north? Because these are three questions here. How do they relate to each other? Or was it all intentionally obfuscated so that nobody will ever figure it out? But there seems to be a lot of puzzle pieces here. This is obviously one of the most fascinating ones.
Extensively in and things like that under the water there. And there's, I've done a lot of looking into major geological events across, that Pacific region, and there's a lot. And then you often get these what look like other side of Canada. Labrador, I think, is where it ends. So I'll talk more about that in a little bit. But something that I have talked about previously, and something that I was getting into a little bit more in the Surrounding of the Camp series, is that we know that these are all connected. We know that the Camp of the Saints, Gog Magog, warfare, and the enemy, I would call them the orders. These are what I would call the orders of chaos, or at least some of them. And, you might be familiar with things like the Knights Templar, or the most notable of what I would call the orders of Gog and Magog. These are the orders that have been drawing people into the network that is, in many layers, I would say, deceiving the world, turning people from the truth, turning people from knowledge of Jesus Christ and the kingdom that he brought and established on earth. And they have turned it into their own kingdom, and they serve and the mystery religions that included the Egyptians. And, they really worshipped these false gods or fallen ones that rebelled against the Most High. And
okay, she's now probably going to be my most sought after interview guest at this point. What I would like to, because obviously the amount of research she's done is incredible. I've done quite a bit myself on the Celts and the Druids, and I think there's something wrong there, obviously, in the official history. Did these so-called mystery religions, did they stem from the Atlanteans who survived, as some theorize? Because the similarities between the Native American languages, the Celts, and even, I think, some of the Japanese, just all areas of the world, possibly some Africans as well, were those those who survived the technological fall and sought to rebuild that tech in other lands? Or is it something else entirely? And how do we parse the validity of all of these myths and legends? But there seems to have been some kind of usurping of all of this information, particularly with the pagans, as it looks like the entire pagan narrative was to cover up something else, possibly to do with the Celts and the Druids. if anybody has looked into that history. It's quite fascinating. I'll search her channel to see if she's ever actually spoken about the Druids and how that connects to all of this and the mystery religions.
You know, they were given, for a time, they were given power in this world. But Jesus came to unseat them and to strip them of that authority, to strip them of their right to do these things. And when Satan was bound in the bottomless pit for 1,000 years, the kingdom of Jesus Christ was established on earth. And, you know, there was no doubt about who was in charge, and there was no room for any of this cult worship. So I want to go over now and just look at some documents here. So this one is actually called The Maps of Gulliver's Travels. And here on page 12, I found a reference to Yesso. So the coast of Yesso, as it appeared on these maps, probably gave Swift a hint for his location of Brobdingnag, whatever that is. Discussing the size of this land, Gulliver concludes that our geographers of Europe are in great error by supposing nothing but sea between Japan and California, for it was ever my opinion that there must be a balance of earth to counterpose the great continent of Tartary. After his involuntary departure from the south coast of Brobdingnag, Gulliver is picked up in the vicinity of 44 degrees north of the longitude 143. And I think this is significant because you'll notice when you start looking for this information, it is just full of hit pieces. Things are relegated to myth. There are...
Thanks, Groupthink Skeptic. Catch you next time. Yeah, I was actually just going to bring up Gulliver. I was actually just thinking this, like, probably about 5 minutes ago, relating to maps and, what was or wasn't fictionalized and referenced in the past, which could have many clues. It seems like she's definitely on the same page and digging things up here.
There's a lot of washing away of in the original text of the New Testament, and so they're just talking about it here, but this is mostly a hit piece, I would say. And then the spelling of Jesus in Latin. After 7 days, I had a dream during the night. I looked and saw a wind rising from the sea and stirring up all its waves. As I watched, this wind made something like the figure of a man come up out of the then he will show them many more signs. I said, Supreme Lord, show me the little season and the end of Gog and Magog. And it's called Kodiak Island. And so it says here that Kodiak Island provides responsive, flexible, and low-cost access to space for small and light lift rockets and stratospheric balloons. It has been launching rockets since 1998 and was the first FAA-licensed spaceport not to co-locate on a federal range. And here is the location. And they have these launching pads on this island. So downrange launching pads, this is where the excitement happens. 6 launch pads support solid, liquid, and hybrid suborbital light lift and small lift launch vehicles. And instrumentation field, there's just a lot going on here. Here you have launch pads 1 and 2. So 174-foot tall launch tower of LP1 in the nearby facility support all indoor climate-controlled launch vehicle integration. And they use, naming conventions, Minotaur, Athena. So these are very much occultists. And just to show you where that is, Kodiak Island, so the Bering Sea, it is my suspicion that this range of islands that circle here look very much to me like what we saw on the map.
Also, she's saying, like, basically any reference to Greek myths or gods would be occultist. I'm not sure where she's getting that from. So is the narrative, the Greek myth narrative, of course you have Zeus, Zeus, king of the gods, and the unseating of the Titans. Now, I just thought of something too. Titans, Tartarus, Titans, Tartarian Titan. Tartan. So is that all a smokescreen? Also, I've actually gone over this in the Altered History series on the Golden Age of Man. Supposedly, the Golden Age of Man was under the Titans, not the gods. So has everything been mixed up and flipped?
Where I showed the land of Yesu, that could be kind of the lowest point of that land. However, if you go and look, people do fly to these islands and they have aerial footage of it. But I don't see a lot of footage from the inside of this area. So I think it's possible that if there was a cataclysm and there's a veil over it, it's possible that it's just not visible right now. Yet. So let's take the grid lines off there. And yeah, so that is Kodiak Island right there. And it is within firing distance for their rockets in the region of the Bering Sea. I always wondered why it was positioned there, because I thought, well, if the north is where everything's happening, how does that help if it's way down there? Because that's a very big distance from there to the actual north of Alaska. However, if we have missing land in the middle here because they've just deleted it off of the spherical Earth model that they use, then it makes sense that it's actually very close to that region. So the spelling of Jesus, I think I've actually gone through this already. Yeah. Creating a myth here, just in the mind as Southern Kingdom. Interestingly, the two countries don't always see eye to eye, despite their proximity, much like neighbors in a subdivision. And then there is a video on this page here, which I've reviewed. It's fairly long, but I'll just give you a summary. So it's talking to the indigenous people that live there, who are really lovely. I think they're very nice people. They're not allowed to go past the Diomedes Islands because the military are on the other side. So obviously the Russian military keep anybody from going past a certain point from Alaska. The fellow who's actually doing this little coverage of this area, he says, oh, I'm going to go film Russia on my phone. But as he's going up the hill, he says, actually, my battery's dying. And then he looks across and it's a kind of a misty day. So you can't really see over there anyway. And there's nothing conclusive about that video at all. It sort of creates more questions for me than it answered. And why can't you take a boat from Alaska to Russia? It's not safe. So rather than saying, oh no, you can't do that, it gives you lots of reasons why actually you wouldn't want to do that. And here's another hit piece. So these are all intended to deter you from realizing that nobody in history had first, and instead we're disgruntled that a couple of foreigners had strolled in from America. Carl and Dmitri were deported. Well, the Aleutian Islands are these ones down here. This line that goes all the way around, and this is called the Pacific Rim. So it goes all the way around the Bering Sea here. And territory visible from Alaska. The photo about was the name Pacific, so the ocean, the Pacific Ocean. So the word Pacific refers to people, actions, and ideas that are peaceful. That if we think there's actually land in there and there's 3 time zones worth of land in there, it does make a lot of sense that they have to navigate it. So this is a big step forward as the U.S. Coast Guard continues to work together with international, interagency, and maritime stakeholders to make our waterways safer. And then the routes take effect on December 1st. Their use is voluntary, but they ensure mariners that they can transit in deep water without natural obstructions. What would those natural obstructions be? And then they say here that holders to make our waterways safer. And then transit in deep water without natural obstructions. What would those natural obstructions be? Take effect on December 1st. They're
So she didn't go into the Diomede, I guess that's how you would say it in Greek. So that is the Diomedes means godlike cunning or advised by Zeus. Or are we going to say advised by Zeus? So that's interesting. Other meanings, it's a genus of the albatrosses, Diomedae. Also, there was the Christian saint Diomedes of Tarsus. Tarsus. Interesting. One of the holy unmercenaries. So that's a curious name there. I don't know if she ever goes into the name there that on Little Diomede. Diomede. Then you have King Island. I mean, these are very, very curious names here.
use is voluntary, but they ensure mariners that they can transit in deep water without natural obstructions. What would those natural obstructions be? And then they say here that safe shipping measures, they say there are few resources. Inclement weather and winds may also impact. Okay, you can go ahead and do that. Receive permission to arrive on the Russian shores of the Barents cover-up in that the tartaria sovereign season come to position. It's not something that I ever wanted, but I'm blessed to do it, and I am blessed to serve the Lord in this way.
All right, so there you have it. Thanks to Bob here for suggesting this or bringing this up. It has been an incredibly fascinating look here on who would have thought they were hiding land in the north. This is a totally new theory to me in terms of the scope. Obviously, there are islands that, small islands that some people say exist or don't exist all over the Arctic, but something this massive is pretty wild stuff here. Pretty wild. Didn't know this deep dive would be looking this closely at the north, because everything really is usually all about Antarctica, and maybe it shouldn't be. So we'll leave everybody with that. So Lord Zed says Pandora doesn't go back in the box. That is correct. So thanks again, everybody, for joining. We'll catch you guys next time.